Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. It's your boy Luke. I have something I'd like to discuss with everyone today concerning what happened to me earlier this year. And a lot of people don't know what happens, and I've been putting it off for a lot of time. So here's me coming clean and just explaining what went on. So in late January, early February, I fell severely ill. I've never felt so ill in my life. I was There were two reasons for this. One, I stopped taking my medication. So I was taking this medication for about 2 years. And in November, December, I just abruptly stopped taking it because I did some research on it and I found out that they were actually antipsychotics. And at the time, I thought that they were just sleeping pills. So I made the decision to stop taking them, and the withdrawal symptoms had a really detrimental impact on my mental health and physical health too. And secondly, I was taking this dissociative hallucinogenic on a weekly basis, and that really messed with my psyche. So those two combined, as well as all the stress that I was under because of exams and coursework and all that, basically made me have a meltdown, and I disappeared from uni for an evening. The police were called, people were concerned, and I turned up in Norfolk, and my family, after discovering me, decided to drive me to the hospital. And so we got to the hospital and we were placed in a room, and an altercation or an incident took place. And basically, I had to be put in this room with guards on the outside to prevent me from leaving. And I was in this room overnight. I was in this room for about 5 or 6 hours. And then in the morning, the doctors arrived and told me that I was being admitted to a psychiatric hospital and that I was being sectioned under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act. And I was very relieved at the time because I direly needed help. I never needed help so much in my life, so it was a bit of a relief that I was finally going somewhere where I could receive it. And so I was escorted to the ambulance, and they strapped me down to a stretcher. And after a 15-20 minute drive, we arrived at the psychiatric hospital in Norfolk, and I was shown to my room. My room was quite large, it had high ceilings, and it consisted of a single bed, a desk, and an ensuite bathroom. And we arrived there, I don't know, sometime mid-morning, I believe, and the first thing I did was go to sleep. Because of everything that I went through for the last few days. And that's basically all I did for the first couple of days, was just sleep, because I was so exhausted, I was so fatigued. I needed to recover my strength. And so after the first few days, I started coming out of my shell, and I started introducing myself to the other patients. There are two patients that were there the entire time that I was there, and they were a bit older than I. They were I don't know, maybe in their 30s, but we got along really well, and they were some of the friendliest, most sanest people I'd ever met, and I wonder to this day why they were even put there in the first place. And so so we bonded over TV and stuff. So we had a community room in the men's quarters where it was quite small, but it had like a couch and a TV on the wall, and it had an ensuite kitchen, and connected to that was a patio area it was obviously sealed off, but we could still play a bit of football there sometimes. And the doctors ran their tests and took my blood samples, and at the time I was quite malnourished because I'd lost my appetite due to stress and I hadn't eaten properly. And so basically, the first couple of days were really tough because I was suffering from these severe hallucinations and delusions, and they were as real to me as the air that I'm breathing now. So nothing could shake that off. I was convinced that these hallucinations and delusions were real, and they were really hard to deal with at first. They were really tough, and I didn't speak to anybody about what I was experiencing. And so over after a few days, the doctors started medicating me. They gave me uh, this drug called risperidone, and it's an antipsychotic, but it's quite light. It doesn't really have that many adverse side effects, and I was on quite a low dose. So I was taking that every evening, as well as another medication called promethazine that's widely used as a sleeping pill. So I was on the combination of those two for the better part of 3 weeks, and but that didn't really help alleviate my symptoms. I was experiencing a lot throughout the first few weeks that I was there. So I tried to settle in as best I could. I had 3 meals a day, so if I could wake up for breakfast, then I'd have breakfast. I'd normally go for the porridge, but there'd be lunch and supper, and the meals were really good. They came with desserts and stuff, and they were freshly made. And yeah, I really looked forward to mealtime every time I was there. So I can't complain about the food. I actually put on a lot of weight when I was there. And yeah, so I just did what I could with time, and I spent the majority of the time reading. They basically stored my personal belongings in this locker room, and so one day I went into the locker room and I discovered that I brought with me this huge ledger, and basically it was called the Necronomicon, the best weird tales from H.P. Lovecraft. And so this book is immense. It's really huge, 1,000 pages or so. And so it took me the better part of 2 weeks to read that, and that really kept my mind occupied. And I read a few other books. They had a little bookcase in the lounge area. They had like a communal area where the other residents would go every day and just chillax and watch TV and stuff. And this was connected to the dining room, but I hardly went there, to be honest, because I suffered from really bad anxiety. I filled out most of my time reading and stuff, and after I finished that huge ledger that I had, I felt really inspired, and I started writing a short horror story called Obi, or The Other Brotherhood. And that took me a good couple of days. I wrote it out in draft form to begin with, and then I wrote it out in a very, very neat version, and I gave it to a member of one of the nurses who said that he used to be an English teacher. And he gave me some good feedback. Told me that the story was good, but it ended abruptly. So that's one thing that I want to do in the near future, and just edit that. And I also started sketching. One day I had nothing to do, so I asked the staff if they could give me some paper, because I was brought in some pencils and rubbers and stuff. So I started copying these pictures and images out of the Necronomicon. And I had 2 comics with me. They were The Stand by Stephen King, one of my favourite novels, and it was in comic format. So I started copying the pictures from that, and I had a lot of fun, and I discovered that I actually had a knack for it, and that I really enjoyed it. And so I sketched about 9 or 10 pictures the entire time I was there. And one thing I regret is not having a diary. I wish, if I could go back, I wish I'd had a diary to record the day's events. But, so a lot of what I'm saying now is having to rely on memory. They basically asked me if I wanted to appeal the decision, because I was placed under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act, which means I had to stay in there for a minimum of 28 days. And after 28 days, they'd have an evaluation of how I was doing and whether I needed to stay in there longer. So I wrote 2 appeal letters whilst I was there, And at the time, I was really paranoid, and I was convinced that if I gave the letter to the wrong person, it could fall into the wrong hands and they'd just throw it in the bin and stuff. So I was really choosy and picky about who I gave my letters to. And yeah, so I sent off my letters, and they were sent to some kind of medical organization that dealt with appeals and complaints from people who are sectioned and stuff. So I sent off the letters and waited to hear a reply from them. And yeah, so apart from the reading and writing, the days included activities. So there'd basically be a calendar, and we'd check the calendar, and there'd be 2 or 3 activities every day at a certain time. So I tried to go to as many activities as I could, and one of them was clay making. And I really enjoyed clay making. It was super fun, where we just make things out of clay. And I made 2 things. I made this head of a cyborg, painted silver with deep set eyes, and it had really sharp teeth and a cleft lip, and it was super cool and super scary. And I also made like some kind of like stone with like a pentagram painted on it. They were really cool, and unfortunately I left them there. I forgot to take them with me. So one thing I want to do next week is go back there and ask if I can collect them. We also had music group. Music group was quite fun. Basically, us patients and a couple of nurses would go into a room, and we'd choose our favourite song, or a song that represented our feelings at the time, and play it to the rest of the group, and we'd all have a turn. And my first time going there, you'd have to appreciate the song. You'd have to know the song to appreciate it, but I played Seize the Day by Avenged Sevenfold, along with the music video, and I was just so emotional at the time when it was playing. It was like one of those moments. And yeah, some other things I did, I played Scrabble with some of the older residents in a common room. I wasn't very good at it, even though at the time I was studying English. But yeah, I started doing that. And another patient arrived halfway through my stay, and to begin with, me and him almost got into a fight, and the guards had to go in between us and stuff and break us up. But then over the weeks, we got to know each other, and we got quite chummy, and we were trying to arrange like a Dungeons and Dragons session. And yeah, we were it's the first time I ever got into D&D, so I was really enthusiastic about it. And we had one introductory session where we had about 3 people, and I mean, it didn't really kick off, to be honest, because it was just us 2 that were interested, so it didn't really take off. So those are basically what filled my time whilst I was there. I tried to keep myself as occupied as I could. So one day I had an MRI scan, and I'll never forget the day. There were 2 nurses with me, a male and a female, and we drove away in a van, and we drove to the nearest hospital to have an MRI. And I'll never forget this moment, because I still think about it sometimes, and it really freaks me out. But basically, we walked into that MRI room, and there's the machine and stuff, and there's the doctor, or whoever he is, and his face looks entirely like he is one of my idols, one of my literary heroes. He looks exactly like Stephen King, and I was just so shocked. I didn't know what to say or anything, and I don't know, I was just flabbergasted. And it didn't last long. It only lasted for about 90 seconds, and they did the scan, and then after that I was driven back to the ward. It further turns out that apparently I had swelling on the back of my brain, the left side of my brain, they said. I'm not too sure about that, so I really have to get more details about that. And so yeah, I had some visits as well. My brother visited with me, Aaron, and he took some time off work, and he stayed in Norfolk just to spend time with me. And yeah, he made sure that I was okay. We had some talks and stuff, and we had this one moment where he asked me if I wanted food, and I said, "Could you get some Burger King?" and he goes into town and he comes back with this big bag of Burger King, and like we just sit down, just munching on the table, and everyone's looking at us with envious eyes, and it's just one of those moments that we had. I also had a few visits from my pa, and he's quite crestfallen to begin with, but then he just wanted to make sure that I was okay. And most of the time he brought snacks with him. He brought nuts and Pringles and Haribo and Coke and that kind of thing. So I was really happy with the visits, because that's basically reminded me what I was missing out on, and that what I needed to get back to. So like I had like these meetings with a psychiatrist. I only had about 2 meetings with him, but they really didn't go well. They went so horribly. I just felt as if like he was abusing his power. He'd stumble in like swaggering and stuff, like apparently on something, and like he'd sit down, like I'd sit down with him, and like I tried to talk with him, but I couldn't get anywhere with him. Like he'd just berate me and belittle me and be really patronizing and smirk, ask me why I got some of the tattoos that I did, and he kept on referring to the Bible over and over again. And this one time, I asked him like if I could go, because I felt like I was well enough to go home, and like he said no, and I was just really angry, and that going back to my room, like I punched like a wall and stuff, and like my knuckles were like bleeding, and I think like I did something to my pinky finger. I went back to my room and I trashed it all. Luckily, the staff didn't intervene. They just left me to it. So I just sat in my trashed room for about half an hour. Then afterwards, they asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. And I put everything back together. The meetings with the psychiatrist didn't go well. But I'm seeing a new one next year, so hopefully things will be better this time. So in my final 2 weeks there, they decided to take me off the risperidone and the promethazine, and they told me that I had to have an injection. I'd have to have an injection, and then once I was released, I'd have to continue having this injection on a monthly basis. And basically, it's an antipsychotic called paliperidone, and I was going to have 100 milligrams of it. And it was a slow releasing serum that would basically obviously be slowly released around my body over a period of time. And I found out that some of the other patients were having the same injection, and we were all really scared, to be completely honest. We were all like petrified about what they were going to put in us. And so to begin with, I outright refused about having it. I said no, I didn't want it. And they backed away to begin with. Then they came back and they told me that if I didn't take the injection, that they could keep me in there for another 5 weeks. So I had no choice. I had no other choice. I had to take it. So one day I'm going to the medicine room, and I'm sitting there with my sleeve rolled up, and they are about to stick me with this injection, and suddenly the needle snaps and the serum leaks all over the bed. And like I'm just shocked. I don't know what to say. And then the person that was giving it to me said that I couldn't have the injection now because they'd have to order it from somewhere else. And I thought like that was like, I don't know, something beyond my understanding that just happened. Some kind of some kind of supernatural force or whatever it was. I couldn't believe my luck. But then my luck ran out, and then a few days later I was injected with it, so that kind of sucked. And the last 2 weeks there, I was going to have a tribunal. So the tribunal were there to determine whether I needed to be there any longer or not. And so I was supposed to have a tribunal with a lawyer and the psychiatrist and somebody else. But then on the day, I got prepared and everything, and they told me that the tribunal was cancelled, and that they'd already come to the decision that I was going to stay there for like another 2 weeks. So I was just I was really upset about that. I was really upset, and I was quite depressed for some time. And yeah, so the last few weeks there, they started taking me out on these little trips. So we had like this occupational therapy team with these two lovely lady nurses, and they take one or two of us out on walks just to refamiliarize ourselves with the outside world. And so uh, we walked through. So I went on these trips about 2 or 3 times. All times we walked through like this cemetery, just near the hospital, and it was really lovely and stuff. It's quite macabre, but at the time that was kind of like my state of mind, and I kind of really enjoyed it. And we made trips to the local supermarket, and I bought some like snacks and that kind of thing. And we also had like another trip where they wanted us to have cameras and to basically go in like a little photography session. So it was me and another patient that went with two other nurses, and so we went along like the seafront and stuff, like taking pictures and stuff. And the entire time I was thinking like, should I just do a runner? Should I just do a runner? And like I was thinking about it, and I was giving the guy like winks, like shall we, but obviously we didn't do it. So I thought about escaping a couple of times, but it wasn't possible. The last 2 weeks though were like a living hell, and two reasons. Like I got a TV in my room, so I asked my pa if he could bring in the TV for me, and he did. He brought it in. It had like a built-in freebie box. And for the last 2 weeks, I just turned into a lazy, complacent couch potato, and all I did was watch TV. And I stopped drawing, I stopped reading, I stopped going to all these activities and classes and groups, and I just stayed in my room watching TV. And that really sucked. And also the medication that had the injection, it had like a really bad impact on my physical health. So it may have calmed down things for me mentally, but my physical health severely declined. I felt like these really horrible sensations in my body. I felt restless and irritable, and my muscles were really stiff. And it's just a horrible feeling being on that medication. And so my last 2 weeks there were just like a living hell, where I was counting down every second of every minute, and time went so slowly. But somehow I pulled through, and then the final day arrived, and my pa came to pick me up, and we packed my things. There was a lot of paperwork to go through, a lot of waiting around. But yeah, after that, I was told that I was free, and that after 5 weeks there, I could finally go home. And so that's basically my experience staying at a psychiatric hospital. It has its good ups and downs, good moments and bad, but it basically helped me get back to reality. It really put my health back on track. So I'm quite thankful to everybody, the staff and my family and friends who all helped me through this hard time in my life. I think I'm going to make some more videos in the future. I'm going to make another video about pre-admission, so what happened to me before I was sectioned. So I'd like to talk more about that. I'd also like to talk about the preceding months, about what I've been doing for these last couple of months. So watch your space, and hopefully see you soon. Adieu.